Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about how to become part of this merry little crew at officehours.global. First hour is a general discussion, any questions that we get around media or virtual production. Second hour, we talk about something that we think is important, something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, our own Laura Thompson will be talking about accessibility. Why is it important? What does it mean? And she's going to give us some examples and then answer your questions about accessibility. So it's going to be great second hour. Tomorrow is the long day. We have education at 8 o'clock. Remember, we don't stream that. And then at 10 o'clock, from 10 to 11, I'll be talking about metahumans, and we'll talk about how I approach it. Someone said masterclass yesterday. It's not really. It's me just saying this is what I know so far. But we'll all talk about it. My recommendation is that you apply to get access to MetaHuman if you want to follow along. It's free. You just have to go through the process, and sometimes it takes a couple hours or a day. So it's good to do it this morning to set that up. But you can sign up for free on the Epic site. And then at 11, we have something special. That's all we're going to say. So we won't stream the 11 o'clock hour as we start to do some experiments. And then we will turn the stream back on at 12. Damayanti Gajar with Hasmukh is going to be here. We're all going to be cooking together again. So that'll be from 12 until about 2. So that's the long day. It's going to be busy. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Bill, what do we got?
Absolutely. Big first question because big first topic. Thoughts from Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania. Thoughts on Adobe buying Frame.io?
Fenwick?
First of all, for those of us who know Emory, it's a cool day.
Such a cool day for Emory.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of questions. How will you pay for it? Will you get a basic thing with your Creative Cloud? Will they kill the Final Cut support day one? They probably will. It's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But to be clear, everything I read yesterday said that Adobe has announced the intent to purchase Frame. I don't know what that means. Sounds like a done deal, but that language does not mean done deal.
Yeah, haven't signed the papers yet, but it's but I think that I think that it'll probably go through. And for those of you who don't know who Emory Wells is an old friend of mine, and he actually was one of the hosts on Mac Break #1. So and he was part of the original crew for This Week in Media, and so Mac Break Video #1, and so he so Emory has and just couldn't happen to a better person. So it really happened through a lot of hard work. So we're really excited for him. Go ahead, Aaron.
Having computer problems. Be right back.
Okay. All right. Jump to Jeffrey.
To answer Chris's question, it's a lot of regulatory stuff that has to happen before the purchase can go through. So that's why it's going to be in a stasis. It'll probably be a stasis for somewhere around 6 months before it finally gets approved and bought from there. I think it's a good idea. We'll see how Frame.io works with other systems, and I'm really hoping it's just going to be this bridge that will bring Final Cut, Adobe, and Resolve together for those people who have to do the cross editing.
Go ahead, George.
As of right now, everything works with Frame.io, so I don't think it's going to be any major changes. According to Emory's statement also, development is going to continue on for all the other apps. So that's in his statement. So I don't think, and if you look at it, if you know the history of all the players that work for Blackmagic, there's 3 big heavy hitters that work for Frame.io right now that was on the Resolve team, including Alexis Van Herkman. So I don't think those integrations are going anywhere. So that's just my take.
Leo?
So one of the things I always thought was a weakness of the current Adobe layout is the cloud part. So moving stuff between different people, I think this is a great move. I also think that it's a good hand to have. I was talking to somebody else earlier today, and one of the things you don't find with Adobe is they don't kill products as badly as others do. They may make them heavier in weight over time, but they don't actually go out and kill products. So this could be a good move to move something so that it has a further exposure.
And Bill, we're not using hands. You got to use the back end.
They killed Premiere for Mac years ago.
Yeah,
Oh.
go ahead, Bill. You will answer this one, but you got to use the back end for the.
I'm sorry, I was
hands.
uninformed. My comment would just be one of the things that I've loved so much about Frame.io is that it was kind of Mac-centric, and it was plumbed initially for Final Cut before the other stuff. And I am a little concerned that it's going to turn a little bit. We've got people like Michael Cioni who have been really strong advocates for the metadata workflow possibilities that are built into Final Cut. So I would be bereft if those diminished in any way. And there is the payment system, which I've never felt comfortable with on Adobe's side, and I hope that doesn't change.
I think it'll be interesting if they just wrap it into the current structure. It could be if you don't pay more and you're just paying the overall Adobe thing. This is a huge value add. It drops the feeling of that cost down a lot. So let's go to the next question.
All right, fair enough. We are going to Ken Jordan now. Ken says, what do you think is more significant of today's Blackmagic announcement? 3 times faster DaVinci Resolve or the half-price URSA Mini Pro 12K?
Aaron?
I mean, I think they're both really significant. Their improvements of DaVinci have been phenomenal over the last few years. Dropping a price of a camera is great, but that just means they're making room in the market for something else. So I think they're both amazing, and Blackmagic continues to push that boundary.
Go ahead, George.
Obviously, good news for the folks that are on M1s and shifting to M1 as a main machine. As far as the camera, according to Grant, parts have become available and gotten cheaper, so he was able to bring that down to 6,000. I have to believe him what he says, because that's always been the norm with all the other cameras.
I have to say that at $10,000, the cameras, I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with the 12K, and at $10,000 is a really good deal. At $6,000, it's a screaming deal. Like that is an amazing value as far as what you can get there. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I have nothing more to add on that.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next question.
Nick Dott is up next, and Nick says, when running an AWS Vmix cloud production, why use a second Vmix instance just for encoding? It seems overkill and expensive.
Go ahead, Leo.
Well, I'm going to say a reason why not to do it, actually, which is that 2 things are actually 2 chances of failure. So the idea that people do it is to stop failure, but actually when you add in layers and layers and layers like this, you are actually increasing or doubling the chance of a failure.
Okay, go ahead, George.
I've been using dual systems for a while now. If you're using Adobe, AWS Connect also, there's no issues there. Again, you're offloading resources. So I don't see anything wrong with the workflow.
All right, next question.
Next question comes to us from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. And Deborah asks, looking to upgrade a Logitech Brio MacBook Pro, can the panel recommend a camera to use with an ATEM Mini? I've recently had no success in creating telestrators, iPad, and then Wacom 1. The budget is $400 to $500.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the issue you're going to run into is that most of the USB cameras that are like the Logitech Brio, I mean, that does have the ability to come in via HDMI, but you've got to translate into HDMI to get into the Mini or any of the ATEM switchers. So the problem is going to be finding something in the $400 to $500 range that attaches through USB without any kind of converter stuff.
If it's working with an ATEM. To use with an ATEM Mini, it's an HDMI out. So it's just looking for an HDMI camera. So it's so a camera that would work with an HDMI with an ATEM Mini would be something with HDMI. So you have the Huddle Cam. You have the Sony 50, I think it's 5100 or 6500. There's a couple of them that are in that range that look pretty good. I will always tell you that I would save longer, or sell some more equipment and get up into a Blackmagic camera, because now you can shade the camera. I mean, it is literally, this is the classic buy once, cry once. You will, if you have an ATEM Mini, you will end up buying a Blackmagic camera. It's just a matter of when, and so because you can control it, you can shade it, you can color it, all of those things are things that are important. So my recommendation would be try to figure out a way to get to the Blackmagic camera, 4K or 6K. I use 6Ks for most of this, most because I have Canon lenses. But the 4K is great if you don't have Canon lenses. If you have a lot of glass already, then it saves you money. And so, but think about that. But otherwise, I think the Sonys are really good in that price range. And a
Alex,
quick reminder:
do you consider them an upgrade? That was her question, and I think are they upgrades?
Those are upgrades. Those are huge
upgrades.
upgrades. And so, and by the way, one of the things for those watching, we have a new back end, and for the panelists, you need to raise your hand earlier. so like now that you're doing it, you need to get into those questions and figure out which ones you want to answer ahead of time. If you do it during the question now, it's much harder for me. So go ahead, Chris. Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, while you're saving to buy once, cry once, you could use your iPhone. You get if you get the right adapter, you can get, which is what Tony's doing, and Tony's camera looks great. So use if
you have an iPhone or an Android, you should be able to get an HDMI out, but the iPhone is it's pretty good. Next, go ahead, Leo.
So I'm on a GH3, which is an old camera. It goes straight into the ATEM Mini, and it has been running flawlessly for a year. It's now going to break. But sometimes you have to sit there and look at what you need. And a second-hand camera like a GH3, which is an older model, as you can see, with the right lens, it does exactly what people are after for a fraction of the cost of a new camera.
Go ahead, Jason.
I would like to say also, save up. But if you can't save up, the Sony FDR AX53 can be bought used. I think it's discontinued or they've iterated it, but it's a fantastic camera and it's right in the sweet spot.
Go ahead, Victor.
Yes, Huddle Candy. Yes, Huddle Candy. Yes, Huddle Candy. Yes,
Whoa, you're doubling up, Victor. I don't know exactly what happened there. All right, let's jump to the next question.
Moving on to Mike Emmett of Melbourne, Australia. And Mike asks, in the last year, we've seen so many news crosses to guest experts in their homes on dreadful webcams with horrible audio. How could the broadcast news gathering world learn from the digital events world and get their act together for better TV?
Go ahead, Chris.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we talked about this, and we talked about whether or not they wanted to, whether or not they were putting out a subtle reminder about, hey, you want us back doing what we're doing. I'm wondering, Alex, if you think there's still any of that, or do you think it's just absolute ineptness or just a lack of caring, or the fact that they are so so vertically minded about, I read the news, I don't want to deal with technology.
I think that we've talked to some folks that have actually been told to keep it basic. Like, so they're like, hey, we could bring in a big camera and make it look nice, and they're actually instructed not to do that. Wow. That they want to make it, there's a look that they're trying to get to creatively, which is the bad look. I think that I don't know. I mean, but literally I've had people that I've talked to that have been told by a network to use less than what they have. And so I think that there is a specific, like, we're up here, you're down there. Or a look that they're coming in from home. Like, if we made it look too good, the people wouldn't know if it was really coming from home. There's something about that that authenticity, I think, that they're trying to get to, that is really ruining their shows, ruining I really think it undermines whether people believe them or not. I think that trust issues with the news, trust issues with it comes from authority, and when you have lots of bad video, you lose authority. And so when they went to all of this bad video in 2020, I think they lost a lot of authority. And I think that that's part of the mix of what's gotten them into trouble. Leo?
Yeah, taking that forward, it's not just authority, it's authenticity. I think that sometimes they actually want to sit there and say, doesn't really matter, we can't be bothered. And we're seeing this a lot. And I think it's going to be a correction that we're going to see slowly move. I don't think it's going to be a shift over a long period of time, but we're already seeing it, that they're going to move to things that I'll be interesting to see if things like press rooms in governments are going to move to a better and faster real-time system. They've tried it, but it still looks a bit jaggy where you see it in some places.
Aaron?
I know of one news network and how it works behind the scenes, and they were on the train that Alex said, and then they stopped and they said, okay, we got to really do some real things. And now they have vastly improved most of their crosses. I think there was a lot of cynicism early on And I think that's bleeding away. Now, the more that people realize that the technology is here, we can do really cool things with it. Unfortunately, that did not cross over to the NBC Olympics with the people at their houses. But
Did not. Only a couple million people watching. I mean, why would you do that?
It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey, real quick.
Yeah, let me start over. We have basically a new era where we went from open house planning to now we're going to have to figure out how to do a media room, and broadcasters are going to be no different. I had a friend that's in broadcasting. She had to go to a different house because she has special needs children, and they're really looking at doing this and not getting rid of the studio, but supplementing it for things like snow days and things like that. And I think
that one of the other issues that they have is just that they're on a shrinking island, broadcast. And so they don't have the money to do a lot of this stuff. Go ahead, Sky, real quick.
Yes, we are on the Today Show. The function of being the producers are coming in from all of their apartments, their remote locations. Yeah, they're trying to keep it very tight. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just the tool they've got access to right now.
Yep. Next question.
Next question comes from us from Jonas Sattel in Stuttgart, Germany. Our friend, what is your favorite test pattern generator? And he's looking for both hardware and software solutions. If the software is what you use, which system do you use?
Go ahead, George.
So hands down, I'm gonna share the screen. So hands down, this is what I use for everything. I can also pipe this out to an hardware if I need to. I'm not gonna, especially for live streaming, I like to try to break the encoders. So I'll use what is called for a fast cycle. So I'll send this down to the encoder and it'll definitely generate obviously motion. So I use that a lot. I'm not gonna go through everything because this will take some time, but this gives you all the tools. This is Sienna video on Mac, and it's a free download. So this will go to Vmix or any NDI source, or you could also pipe it out to a hardware encoder.
Jason?
George nailed it. That's exactly what I was going to say.
So when I'm testing encoders, I shoot video of oceans. So I have, anytime I'm near the water, I have a camera and I'll shoot video of it because that is very, very, very difficult to encode. And so you don't actually get a good encode ever. It is just a function of how bad is it. And so that's how you kind of learn it's just a sliding scale because there's too many pixels moving. And so I use that for just general encoding tests. And then the other tests I do, I build most of my own test patterns. And most of these are because I'm doing immersive audio. So I have to test specific speakers and things like that. And then the other thing that I'm looking at is, that I build is stuff that will display itself in HDR as well as SDR. So I know what I'm looking at when I'm looking at it. So these are gradients. So the gradients will break up if they, smooth gradients will break up in 8-bit, but won't break up in 10-bit. So I know whether that pipeline is working. The two best things, the two things that in a facility when we recommend things for companies, I don't even have them right now. So I use pieces of them when I need to or for shows. But when we recommend it for facilities, it is Matchbox from Hitomi that allows us to sync audio and video, but it also is a good bars generator. And it also will do it does a lot of different test signals that you can do there. And then the second one that is the most important one as far as an image test signal is SRI. SRI makes I can't think what it's called, but it's an analyzer. It visually will show you everything right and wrong with your image. Like you just pass it through the system. It'll tell you whether you were scaled, whether it went to 10-bit to 8-bit, whether, different color spaces. It'll tell you everything just by looking at it. So it's the number one way to just test your entire system to make sure that the pipeline is working. But if you do SRI analyzer, you should be able to find it. It's amazing. Next question.
Ari Block is up next, and he has a specific one for John Pretto. He asks, John, you were comparing the Brio and the C920 just now in the pre-show. For what use case, and what are your conclusions?
Because Alex asked me to do this a long time ago, and I popped it in right before we flipped over to the regular office hours. The C920 does not look good compared to the Brio. I'm going to do it again in the pre-show and after hours.
Yeah, The C920 is something if you can afford, if that's all you can afford, then you use it. I mean, it's better than most other 1080p cameras, and it's not very expensive. The Brio is significantly better. It is the optics are better. We haven't found the Huddle Cam is competitive with the Brio, but we haven't found anything under $200 that is competitive with the Brio, including I have the Dell right here, the new Dell, and it's not competitive. It is better designed. The exterior is better designed. The industrial design is the best I've ever seen. Just the sensor isn't competitive with the Brio. Next question.
JHB in New York is up next, and he asks, when using Zoom ISO and trying to get 4 separate video feeds into an ATEM ISO, what additional hardware do I need to add my Mac Mini M1 setup to record separate video tracks? Thanks.
You need a Blackmagic Duo. Is what I have 5 of them for Office Hours 2.0. We have 5 of them, and then you need a Sonnet external box, and so those can run a couple $100 for the boxes that I got, up to $1,500 or $1,300 or something for the 1U racks that are really nice, but I just didn't put the money into those yet. And so, but that's all you need from the Mac Minis to do that. Now that's going to put out. That's going to put out SDI. So I'm using SDI for that. So you'd have to convert it back to HDMI. Now there may be a way. I know that Fenwick, if he's here, Fenwick I think disappeared, but I think Fenwick is getting multiple HDMI outputs from those. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Can't hear you.
This is the one right here. Sorry. This is the one right here from Pluggable. Andy Carluccio has been testing these out. The only thing that I say on this is these are USB-C and not Thunderbolt. So they work right now, but a future update, this could just completely disappear from there.
Right. And go ahead, Jason, real quick.
Just a quick question for you about the Duo 2s. I have a pair of them and I haven't connected them via Thunderbolt 3 yet. Do they work on the M1s?
Mine are all M1s, M1 Mac Minis, and then the Duos with the Sonnet boxes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they seem to work just fine. And a reminder to our panelists, you have to get ahead of the questions. I'm going to stop taking them after when we get to the question, you're either your hands up or not. So I'm going to probably push a lock into that system soon. So just get ahead of it. Next question.
Nick Bad in the UK asks, upgrading from a 2016 i7 Touch Bar 15-inch MacBook Pro, should I wait for the equivalent machine or go for one of the current M1s, Air Pro 8 or 16 gig?
Go ahead, Leo.
So I would actually wait for the next iteration of 2016. We're not a long way from, or the next iteration of the 15 or 16 is. We're not a long way from that at the moment. So and see what comes out then. The M1 chipset is with other announcements and other things that are coming out. You know, the M1 chipset is just blowing everything apart. So there is no point buying an i chipset anymore, I think, on anything that is going to run Mac. Those like myself on an i9 are going to find ours is just left behind very, very soon. So I would definitely wait and go for the if they bring one out.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think it's okay to wait at this point. You've got a decent machine now, and you wouldn't gain anything at all from buying an Intel one. Yeah. So I'd wait for the next whatever it is.
Jason?
Yeah, absolutely wait. I mean, you've waited this long, and I know the 2016 is difficult. I love my 2019. I would be nuts if it would be driving me nuts at this point if I kept the 2016. That said, just hang on a little longer.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to buy something, buy an M1. Do not invest in Intel machines. So you can buy the M1 smaller version of that laptop right now, but I would do that, or an iMac or something. But I wouldn't get at this point, I would not buy an Intel computer. The M1 performance is so much higher, and as we saw with Blackmagic, things are moving fast. So, next question.
Leo Mindell and Pinner in the UK is in next here on the panel. For To Kill a Mockingbird production team have released a video celebrating their Broadway opening, and there's a link there. Will mainstream theater be changed from the shutdown?
Go ahead, Aaron.
So I'm not involved in mainstream theater, but we have talked to Tlaloc a lot about how this works, and he's pretty convinced, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but he's pretty convinced things will change. And I tend to agree. I think there's a lot riding on all of this stuff, and Broadway will be back, but Broadway will change.
Richard?
I would answer in short, absolutely and absolutely not. It's a very wide question. Some things will change in how we work and how we develop things and how teams come together and create work. But essentially, theatre has been the same for 2,000 years, and it is its own medium. It will remain its own live and performance medium, but there will be new advances and changes and developments at the same time. But it doesn't need to change. But because everything we're doing is an additional platform, it's new and it's a separate thing. So even a live theatre show online is a different new platform. Theatre will remain exactly as it is, with changes and developments and evolution.
Yeah. Next question.
Moving on to Khalid Asaya. I'm sorry, I'm probably messing that up. I didn't look at it ahead of time.
I think it's Khalid Al-Jumaya.
Al-Jumaya, thank you very much, Alex, from Hassa in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Khalid says, what Mac application do you recommend to be used for telestration? And if you can, please show us the ATEM mini settings for it, because mine is showing as too pixely.
So I think that what you're talking about being too pixely is it being aliased. Let me see if I can pull this up. So what the key is that if now I use my own software, and I know everyone gives me a hard time about not releasing it, but I need to find a Swift programmer. so if you know one, let me know.
I still don't have time to do the one that that I told you I'd do.
I know. So anyway, but what you if I cut to, so let me show you the settings here. So here's the what I have, and what I think what Khalid is talking about is the fact that these edges are smooth. So the edges along the edges, along the thing is not what we would call aliased. I think that what you're talking about from being pixelated. So if I cut to this, this is actually basically the settings that I'm using here. So I'm inverting my key, which is a black image over white. I am using, what I'm doing to do this is not a green. If you use green, you may see pixels or aliasing, because you're keying a 422 signal. So you will see aliasing. The reason I get it perfectly smooth is because I'm not keying a green screen. I am using a black and white image that is being used as a key source. So what's coming in is I'm saying I have a black and white. It's just a black image over. Now I blurred it just a little bit. That gives me some control. So I have a slightly soft pen, not a sharp pen, but a soft pen. That means I can control how thick it is and how smooth it is down here. And then I use a fill source. This is green. That's what you're seeing here. And so then I have the clip. And if you look at this, if I do a circle here, and then let's see, this is going to be very meta here. Let's see if I might be looking at the wrong one. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so you see see how I make it thinner and thicker here? And then the gain. And I think that what you're talking about here is, with mine, it's actually pretty hard because of the softness of it, but you can start to see that aliasing now in the image. Well, some of you might be able to see it, but that aliasing is because I'm pushing that too hard. As I soften that up, as I move my gain down so that I'm hitting it gently, and then push the clip down so that I can basically refine by using a soft edge, by using a soft brush, I can refine that edge, and I have control of it in the ATEM, so I don't have to keep on playing with the brush. I just make the brush a little blurry, and then and then I'm basically doing the tuning of it inside of the ATEM. But any drawing program will do what I just did. Mine just is simpler. Next question.
Comes to us from Andy Carluccio, who asks, looking to get a MacBook for my fiance. Is the general consensus still that the Air is the best bang for the buck, considering that the M1 chip is mostly the same? Is now even a safe time to buy with new chips on the horizon?
Go ahead, Leo.
So opposite to my comment earlier, because the Air has already moved over to the M1 and the M1 is going to be producing The Air is a really great product. It has been for low non-production use. I think the Air has always been a great product. And this now, with it being on the M1 and fanless, and this thing will just last forever, is a great solution.
Yeah. Go ahead, Victor.
Hopefully my audio is cleared up. And Andy, the answer is yes, it is, I believe, the best one. Although I would wait right now until before the end of the year. I suspect new hardware will be coming in the Air.
Go ahead, Richard.
In a former life, I used to work for Apple Retail, and the number one question you ask when someone wants a computer is, what do you want to do with that computer? Because that will then affect how and which one you want to go for. So the fanless option is fantastic, but do you need more power? Will that power, do you want to do video editing over time? Do you want to kind of upgrade? It's a detailed question, but it's a great option.
And Aaron, real quick. Nope.
Nothing to add.
Jason, real quick.
As long as you're familiar with her use case and don't think it'll interfere, I think the MacBook Air is great.
Next question.
Chris Marshall in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan says, Alex, what is your Wacom model and size, and do you use it as your everyday mouse?
I do not use it I use it as a telestrator only. I don't use it as my everyday mouse. And I have the 16-inch Wacom. The Wacom one will also work. It's a lot less expensive. The other kit that I have uses a Wacom one. And so that's the the only thing you lose really is some buttons on the side, which I don't really use. so it works well. But the Wacom 16-inch 1080p whatever is the one that I have in this desk just because it's been here for a long time. So but that's what I use. Next question.
Next question comes from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. And Deborah says, what is the character limit for posing questions in Mukana?
It moves a little bit. I can't remember whether it's 250 or 300. And I'm sure someone could figure it out, but it's somewhere in that range. What we found is that's the maximum number of a reasonable question to read for the show. So, and we've had a variety of iterations of this. We've had notes where people turn it into a 600-word question or 600-character question, and we found that it was better to pull it down a little bit and have people be just a little bit more concise. But it's somewhere, I think, in the 250 range or 300 range, somewhere in that range. Very close to Twitter. Next question.
George Kennedy Jr. here on the panel from Washington, D.C. How can I fix the image shift in my prompter every time a speaker changes? I'm using dual monitors in Zoom. The second monitor is my prompter.
Can you explain that, George?
So I have the second, if you click on dual monitors, I have the second window in my prompter so I could see like Alex right now. So it depends, like Alex is fine right now. It won't change my image, but like when we get to like the brights and so forth, like let's say on Richard, it'll just change the brightness of my, or the darkness of my image. I mean, if I'm on screen,
because it's going through an image,
right? It's picking up the lens is picking up the light from the glass.
Yeah,
so I'm not sure I can really resolve it.
Yeah, I think that you might. I don't know whether you have a 70-30 or a 60-40 screen as far as the transparency. So what you could do is what we used to do is build a 50-50, that you can get a 50-50 silvered screen, and it would be, so it's hard, you couldn't use it as a teleprompter because it's too hard to see, but it is basically less, is it 50-50? I can't remember which way that goes. It might've been the other direction, like 80-20. Anyway, it is, and my brain is not going to pull that back together, but it was more transparent. So it's the transparency of it. And I think it's actually 80-20. I think 60-40 is a very silvered glass, and then 70-30 is a less silvered glass, and then 80-20 is a very so I think that's the direction that we went to do exactly what you needed. We would see it flashing on people, especially on one where it's more silvered. So what you're looking for is a less silvered screen. Now, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, I've just tested DaVinci Resolve 17.3, and it has the same playback pauses after pulling down a menu and catches up issue on the Mac. Could it be an architectural issue with Resolve and not a bug, even though it's not on other platforms? I don't think it's, it's not on other platforms. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's if it's not on other platforms, then it means it's not on purpose. So it may not be
Yeah, it may actually be some kind of problem if it's not happening on other platforms, but I don't know. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, what are some good methods to stabilize a camera at the top of a 15-foot C stand outside of sandbags at the base? The event is an outdoor hybrid wedding. The stand is for an elevated drone angle of view and windy weather is possible.
Go ahead, Leo.
Okay, so if you want to stabilize it, you can't do it at the bottom, you have to do it at the top. So you put in guy ropes to hold it, to stabilize it. You can also build a truss into something that is not a single C stand. But, and this is the big thing, if you are expecting high wind, none of this is going to be good. If that is the case, and I've had this with weddings outdoors, sometimes the weather takes priority, particularly when you've got wind. Wind is the worst thing. Rain, I can sort of deal with. Wind, nothing stays together.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I wouldn't use a C-stand for that. It's just going to, even if you guy it, it's going to move around a lot, and it's going to be really dangerous. You could truss or something else, but yeah, it's all going to move around.
Bill, real quick.
I've done it a couple of times when I've absolutely has to. It's a bad rig, but you can use aircraft cables and turnbuckles, the little tiny stranded aircraft cables, and guy wire out in 3 dimensions from that, and then try to tack it down as much as possible, but never going to be totally stable.
You may find a junior stand is a lot more stable, like a larger, more beefy stand, and then a gimbal on the top, may work depending on how windy it is in that process. If it only has to go to one angle, if you're up high and you don't have to turn it around and it's pointed, one of the other things that we've done is put something on either side of the camera, around, basically build a cage around the camera that's not connected to it. I know it sounds crazy, but it tends to then not have the camera vibrate as much. Next question.
Eric Price, Leavenworth, Kansas. Next question. When using a DSLR as a webcam, is it safe to leave it on for extended periods of time, like through all of after hours?
Leo?
So I am actually using a mirrorless, which is staying on all the time. The mirrorless is at work, and the mirrorless is what you do is you replace the batteries. The big thing with any of these things is you've got to make sure it will actually stay on. A lot of the DLSR, there is a trick which you hold down the on button with a rubber band, which will keep them going over. You have to half on, so it will enable it, and then it will stay on. But the overheating doesn't happen. What actually happens is that they cut off after they hit the 29.9 minute limit.
Go ahead, Jason.
My concern, so a DSLR stands for digital single lens reflex, basically a periscope, right, that reflects what the lens is seeing when you're taking a still picture into your eye through the viewfinder. My concern would be, in the long run, I don't think you're going to harm the camera, but you could end up messing with the sensor a little bit. You might get some ingress. That's my thought.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, what makes broadcast audio consoles like Calrec, Wheatstone, and Lawo better for that market than live sound or recording consoles?
Go ahead, Jason.
They are ludicrously routable. They are designed absolutely to be routable from now until the end of time, which is exactly what an FM station, for example, needs, but not what live sound really cares about.
All right, go ahead, Bill.
So in my early days, I realized that most of the big companies started out just like the rest of us. It was somebody doing a do-it-yourself thing, and then they refined and refined. They finally found out they had a product. They kept refining. They listened to their customers. All those little tweaks to make something really good for a vertical market gets built into professional gear over the course of time, and that's what separates it from do-it-yourself stuff. So the broadcast industry tuned these for broadcasting, and the live sound industry tuned those for live sound, putting only the features they need in.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael said, Alex, you have said not to purchase an Intel Mac at this point in time. Do you think that Waves and other audio vendors will catch up with full M1 support soon?
They sure better. because no one's buying any new machines, the thing is that they can probably get away with it for another year because people just hang on to the machines they have. That's what happens is people don't upgrade. So it definitely, they're not big enough fish to affect Apple's sales or anything else, to do that. So, but there'll be some point where people stop using the software because it's not caught up. I think Pro Tools is starting to get into that danger point where I think I believe if I'm not correct, it's Mojave. Like you have to keep your Pro Tools rig in Mojave, which is just crazy, so it's gonna be interesting. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, it's you upgrade or die, and this is exactly the same as happened before. We'll remember when we went from Motorola chipsets over to Intel chipsets, and some things never made the transition. Some products never actually crossed over; they died on that stake. And you need to, if they want to be there, and I think they will. There's so many reasons to use it because we are seeing a very big divergence. I mean, that's really important to state. We're seeing a coming together of the mobile on the Apple infrastructure. It's all coming together, but we're seeing an even further divergence away from the PC market.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And Apple's already said this, that they have a 2-year plan to do all Intel M1 within that point, and then of course the 5 years before they discontinue and everything. I do know that there is rumor that there's one more Intel Mac that's going to be coming out. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not, but if these guys don't come on, they can port over to PC, and maybe there'll be somebody that makes some sort of third-party software that brings it all together, but it probably won't be the best thing in the world.
I think the only rumor that I've seen is the Mac Pro may get an upgrade to its chip. Like they're not going to build. Apple's not going to build any new computers with an Intel chip. They're just going to upgrade the chip that's in the Mac Pro, so that it can keep up while they get ready to replace it with M1. I think the two things that are going on is, number one is Apple's moving that direction. Number two is it's going to be very, very hard for PC manufacturers to keep the same price point and compete with Apple. So Apple's about to swap the situation where performance per penny is much higher on the Mac than it is on the PC, and it will get worse, because now Apple has a completely integrated system that they own. There's no externalities. One thing you want to look at is when Tim Cook says legacy components are slowing down the iPhone release, what that tells you is that Apple is going to replace everything with their own silicon, and more of it will end up on the chip. And that's going to be harder and harder and harder for PC manufacturers to compete with from a performance perspective. And so, this is just a slow unwinding turn for people who in AV, because you'll still be able to use a PC, but it'll always be slower within the next 2 or 3 years, or a lot more expensive. But it won't be, for the price performance will not be there anymore, because they just simply, the infrastructure can't do what Apple's doing. And that's why everyone's suddenly worried about Apple, because they're moving like a startup at the size of an elephant. It's a very scary thing for everybody in the industry. Next question.
JHB in New York says, great seeing the panelists set up yesterday. Are most panelists using the Heil PR40? Thanks.
How many people are using the Heil? So some of us. Oh, Tony's using a Heil. Yeah, there we go. All right, yeah, so quite a few Heils and SM7Bs, right? That's what you got. I think that's pretty much most of our group. And
it's
then
MV7, but
MV7, right?
MV7's popular.
And then
Alex, can you get Bob? Can you get Bob on the show?
I tried. I'll ping him again. I'll just ping him again and see if we can't get him on. Wait, hold on. Well, we'll do it another day. Some other day we have to get it where we show all of the Heils are in frame, and then I'll send it to Bob and say, we really want to come talk to us. We're already using your mic anyway. There's no sales here. We just want to listen to you. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. How could I guard against noise and interference connecting multiple synthesizers to an audio interface or mixer in the studio without a direct box in the path?
We don't have Carl today. Carl's out shooting a show. He was with us in the pre-show, and we don't know. Todd and Carl are not here. Those are our synthesizer experts right now, unless Ken wants to. I know Ken's doing a little bit of synthesizer. Do you have any input for us? No.
I'm connecting via my Mix Pre.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, noise is always going to be part of an analog synthesizer. My immediate thought is that, be dead sure that you're on the same circuit, and if you're plugging in power, try to unify your power input. Yeah. I mean, that's the best you can do, really.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Totally agree on that. And if you don't want a mixer in, but if you do want a mixer in, a lot of mixers don't need direct boxes anymore. They have ways to bring that that synthesizer in without the need of that.
Next question.
Comes from Douglas Carmichael again. This time he says, George's NDI signal generator display mentions NDI DMX. Can NDI data streams carry DMX to control lighting equipment? And how do you demultiplex the DMX from the NDI?
Go ahead, George.
I don't know much about that feature set. I did post a white paper for that particular feature in Mukana, so you might want to take a look at it.
And we have a room for a couple more questions. If people are, I think that our new system has us running through this much faster. If you have any other questions, go ahead and throw them in there. Let's go to the last question we have out so far.
Douglas Carmichael is up with this one. In 2014, Roland moved production of most of their music products to Malaysia. Why might they have done this? And could there be quality issues in a low-cost country?
Go ahead, Leo.
So things move around in countries, and it's quite a complex issue. You need not just to have where you design things, you also have where you manufacture. And the manufacturing points of countries have changed over the years. And there are hotbeds of countries which are getting better and better at delivering certain products. And I think this is in one of those cases where Roland have looked at where they're going, they looked at what they want to have to manufacture, and also once you then have the people close to the manufacturing, you improve the design close to manufacturing, you improve the product quality because you're able to reiterate and change and adapt, and they're all speaking the same language. And I would guess that they're looking at it from that perspective.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, there are always two components to, the difficulties and the potential benefits of this kind of a move. The first one is having all the parts in the same place on the same continent. That's always a plus. But what happens after that, to me, is more interesting. What happens is you end up with a highly skilled set of labor and assembly, in the same way that if you want rotoscoping work done, it's India. There's just an extremely skilled set of labor. So I think it also is the culture that ends up, growing up around that.
Yeah, India and Philippines are the two places. Then the interesting thing is we send a lot of motion capture cleanup to Philippines because they're really good at it. And what happens is, to Jason's point, is that you get started because it's less expensive, but you keep it because you have a huge farm team. Baseball, the big thing is that, baseball in the United States or football in the United States is what it is because of Little League. It's the fact that, kids start at 5 years old and they slowly build up, and, or basketball or whatever, they start playing very, very young. And they build up these skill sets. And there's this huge sorting system. They get weeded out partially by the end of Little League. Then they get into high school ball, then they get into college ball, or they're drafted early. And all of those things happen very slowly, and it culminates in extremely highly skilled. And it's a very inefficient system in the sense that you think about, might be 10 million or 20 million kids playing baseball, at 10 years old. And there's just a handful, like a tiny fraction of a percentage point that end up in the pros. But they all think about it. I thought about it when I was a kid. Someday I'd be, a catcher. Anyway, so in the same sense, when you get these, I was there when the roto started going to India, and it was bad. Like, it was the roto coming out of India was not usable. And so there wasn't an understanding of what the edges should look like and everything else. But within 5 years, it was as good as what we do in the United States. And within another 5 years, it was better. But it's partially because it was less expensive. They just threw more people at it. And because they threw more people at it, it means that a lot more people learned how to do it. And there's just the sheer numbers of culture of people. What we're trying to do here is do that cross-pollination, globally among all of us, wherever we are in the world, so that we can all get better together, and that's but that's what's happening in these verticals. And a lot of these countries, they give huge tax, bonuses. They sometimes help pay for a lot of the things. They do a lot of things to bring that work to their country because it makes a difference for people. A lot of people it's not just the people who work at the factory, it's the entire ecosystem around it. So countries can be very aggressive about bringing people in. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, I've watched many YouTube synthesizer jamming videos, which were recorded directly from the stereo output of a synth producing multiple sounds, drums, strings, and so forth. Could you make a quality mono-compatible mix direct from the device?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, they're all kind of by default mono-compatible. You're not going to get phase issues most of the time from a synth. It's just fine. And most of the people don't care. they just output the stuff because it sounds good, and that's it. Yeah,
Jeffrey.
If you're going into a mono device, then yes. But the more important thing is if the synthesizers are already panned to left and right, that could cause some volume issues. So the synthesizers will have to move everything to center before you start playing.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, what is the formula for bandwidth needs for use with a Zoom ISO if you're pulling 4x720 or 4x1080 feeds and the gallery?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think Andy, and he can correct me if I'm wrong on this, said that Zoom will take down 6 megs per second per 1080. And in our testing, we've done 8 1080s. It obviously depends on what people are able to send you anyway, but we've done 8 1080s, and it's around about 30 megs. It's taken over our system.
Yeah. Next question.
Carmi Weinsvik in Redondo Beach, California says, would after hours be a good place for someone to ask longer questions as Deborah Woodfork was considering?
Yeah, you come on and ask them. You can definitely, come on to after hours. After hours is where for those of you who are watching, I mean, this is something we kind of buzz through a lot of questions. We cover a lot of ground. We fill in a lot of gaps. And then we have a whole nother, there's another 21 hours of us hanging out, and that's the time. If you have something that's more complicated, something you're trying to figure out, something you're trying to deal with, people just, Chris, what were you working on yesterday, Chris? It was, you were working on a Stream Deck.
I was doing a whole bunch of stuff. Chris
has learned to take full advantage of after hours. He's like, I don't understand this thing. Let's work on it.
So it actually relates to the last question. I am now getting 4 isolated HDMI outputs from an M1 Mac Mini using Companion, Zoom ISO, and a Stream Deck to select them and route people out of a grid to the thing. And I absolutely could not have done that by myself. I mean, the amount of help that was, rendered was amazing. It was just, it's unlike any other learning environment experience, and I got it to work.
And I have to admit that you saw my little thing with the power yesterday, but I've gotten to the point where I don't even try to I'm not going to read the manual. I'm just going to bring it up in after hours or office hours, and we're all just going to figure it out together. And I wasn't willing to figure out where the phone jack was.
Somebody needs to. The headphone. Yeah. No, the real goal is to somebody write actually, this is for Ken. Make a website that's called some derivative of Google. Like, I have to Google that. And when you click on it, it just goes,
it's a real thing.
Pulls you right into after hours. Google.tech or something.
Go ahead, Leo, then Richard.
Yeah. One of the things I would say though, is it's great to ask the questions first here. And then so it's prepped up so that we know that they come into after hours, because if we don't have anything coming into after hours can start a bit chatty at the beginning, but it will be much, if if we know somebody's coming in with a question and they come in and raise their hand, then you get a lot of people at the beginning.
And you have a real density of knowledge in the panel. Like the panel is built to talk about this stuff and answer those questions. So the best thing to do is to ask a question. And if it's not answered not answered fully in office hours, then go into after hours and dig into it further. But that's really the best way to do it, is to go ahead and ask the question and figure out a way to ask a question that you need in 255, characters or whatever. And then if it's not fully answered, then bring it in. But that's what I would recommend, because you're going to get a quick answer really, really fast that you might be able to use. You might go, that opens it up and I don't need any more help. But if you do, you've got a whole nother 21 hours to come in and ask questions and hang out with everybody. It's quite interesting. Yeah, Chris, real quick.
I'm sorry, it would be awesome if there was a way where in a very ad hoc way, we could like almost schedule or set aside an hour. Imagine going into the community center and say, can I use this room at 3 o'clock? Where we could say at 5 o'clock, there's going to be, a Stream Deck lab, or there's going to be a companion lab.
And we're working on that. Yeah. So we're definitely working on the idea that we're going to start scheduling labs into breakout rooms. And so we're talking through the mechanics of how that works and what it looks like. And
it's happening now in a very ad hoc way.
But what we're looking at is being able to schedule like next week, like in the schedule you get every day, it'll be like, here are the labs, like the labs and after hours are these things. And if you're interested in doing those labs, ping me and we'll start putting those in. So I don't want to fill up all of after hours that way, but what we realized is by doing breakout rooms for it, this was innovated not by me, but by a lot of the folks in after hours, is by using a breakout room for that. You could have it be like, hey, there's a breakout room. That way the discussion in the main room can continue if people want to, but you could also have a whole lab going on in another room. I started realizing that eventually we could end up, what I don't want to do is do it all the time just yet, because I think it'll take too much energy out of the main room because we just don't have enough people yet. We have a lot. I mean, it's 30 to 50 people all the time, but when we get to 300 people, in the room all the time, that's when you can start just running multiple labs all the time. And because there'll be still enough to maintain critical mass. So those are some of the back calculations. Next,
Deborah's is actually an interesting case because she actually asked the question in Discord, and then I helped her go into after hours, and then with Leo and Carl, we looked at the problem, realized what it was, and then now she's coming back to office hours with the question about HDMI.
Okay, got it. Let's jump into the next question real quick.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, I love the full frame look, but if greater depth of field is the aim, does crop sensor Micro Four Thirds solutions make more sense than stopping down a full frame lens, or are there still reasons to use the larger sensor system?
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
I was just going to say real quick that aperture and the size of sensor, it's the big aperture that gives you that super shallow depth of field. And in fact, really large aperture, sometimes you're deciding, do I want the tip of the nose or the eye to be in focus? Right. So just be wary about that.
And the thing to know is that your lenses are generally sharpest around 5.6. So they are overall, when you go all the way open, your lens, not all lenses, but most lenses you buy will be softer all the way open than they are at about 5.6 aperture. So having a full frame sensor that is stopped down somewhere between 4 and 6.5 or so, somewhere in that range, is going to be a sharper image on the areas that are in focus than it would be if you're using a smaller sensor that's all the way open. So something to consider. Last question for the hour.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles says, what's the best solution on the PC side for scraping 3 guests from Zoom into an ATEM?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So what you can do is you could just basically put the HDMI cables in. You go into a Zoom room and you can have three separate videos, as long as you're not doing a presentation as well. And then there's a monitor, and I can't remember the name of it, that you can actually pass it through, so you can actually see what's going on. A lot of people use that for the ATEM, so it'll go into the monitor and then back out into the ATEM.
And by the way, there was an accessibility question that I meant to push back a first hour, and I actually pushed an accessibility question back out. So if you saw it disappear in the list, you got to push it back. It got pushed into your notes. It didn't get deleted. It got pushed into your notes. I apologize for that. I was trying to move a first hour back, and I did the wrong thing. So anyway, just put it back in if you don't see it there in the list that's currently up. Okay, so we're going to change directions and talk about accessibility. Now, Laura Thompson has been a member of our group for a long time, and oftentimes is our guide as it comes, when it comes to accessibility, of us thinking about it, processing it, and so we thought we'd have her on to talk about accessibility. We're really excited to have you, Laura. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
I am actually an academic specialist at a university. So I work with students on class selection, tutoring, helping them progress, and really retaining students and getting them to graduation successfully. All things in that realm are kind of my job.
And how did you? Why is accessibility important to you?
Okay. The $1 million question. I'm actually legally blind, and it's kind of interesting how I came to office hours, because I was having problems at the beginning of the pandemic. Oh, we're doing this on Zoom. Well, Zoom doesn't work, this and that and the other thing. And it's like, I needed help. And you put the call out on MacBreak going, we're trying to figure this out. Come talk to us. And I jumped into Zoom and I jumped into chat, and you just said to me, you need to come sit on the panel with us. And I was like, this is unlikely. And I just followed the process and followed it through, and here we are.
And Laura, for those watching, Laura has been a valuable part of our panels, especially on the weekends, our education panels, for a very, very long time. And again, really constantly brings us back to it. Now, what do you think people miss when they think about accessibility? What do you think is important for them to think about?
The thing that people miss is that it's not hard. It should not be an afterthought. If you and Ken can speak to this, if you engineer it in from the beginning, it's not hard, because accessibility really helps everyone. It's not something special. It's not something extra. It really just needs to be, it makes it easier for everybody. You know, how many people nowadays that have full hearing will watch one thing turn down with the captions going while they're listening to something else?
Yeah.
How many people will, read books at 2 and 3x? The 2 and 3x really came from the screen readers, as I will demonstrate here in a little bit. Screen reader users don't listen to things at the rate of normal human speech. We're running typically 2 to 3 times, because we kind of scan the way you would scan a page with your eyes. We do it with our ears.
Huh. Interesting.
So
yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. It just really is a matter of universal design helps everybody. That's why they call it universal design. Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know that for us, the explosion of demand for captioning or subtitling really came from Facebook, because suddenly people were making decisions about whether they were going to watch a video or not by looking at the text. They didn't want to open it up and hit play. And so suddenly, to your point, it wasn't about accessibility as much as it was about marketing, of making sure that people, even if they could, see it fine, or hear it, they would not turn it on until they were kind of told what was going to happen there. So I understand that you have like a little demo for us or something to show us.
Yes. If I can get screen share.
Copy. Stand by.
One moment.
You got that, Sky?
Yep, I got it.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
There we go.
1 second here till I get to the right. This is our officehours.global website. And I need to make sure that the share sound is on.
Full speech.
Can you hear that?
Yep.
Okay, now I have slowed this down.
Leaving menus, a global conversation where no one's left out. Dash Google Chrome, toolbar, address and search bar, edit, HT escape.
Has been amazing in working with this website. And I want you to pay attention when we get to the graphic on the About page. And listen, close your eyes and listen to it.
Pretto has joined the meeting. Land https://officers navigation region main nav office hours panelist from first row left to right Brian Maddox, Aaron Graham, Daria Musk, Jonas Stoddle, Alex Lindsay second row left to right Charles Klein Graphic Jr., Liberty White, Jason Seep, Emily Russo, Leo Laporte third row left to right John Nicholson, Tony Mobley, Jim Hankins, Stuart Fairweather fourth graphic row left to right Chad Lafarge, John Hewitt, Doug Ferguson, J. McKenna, George E. Kennedy Jr., Clawlock Lopez Waterman last row left to right Graphic, John Pretty, Chris Fenwick, Bill Davis, Mickey McAcher, Haz McGatchar, Guy Cochran, Cochran, graphic. In March of 2020, deep in the dark days of COVID, a handful of media artists began meeting every day, 7 days a week, to trade notes and fend off the isolation. A year later, Office Hours Global has become a global community of almost 4,000 media and event professionals. We still meet each day to learn from each other, work with each other, and forge a new path for their industries. They come from all walks of life on nearly every continent. The only thing common throughout the community is curiosity and passion for what they do. This curiosity and passion drive the conversation every single day. Joining Office Hours Global is easy and it's free. Listen at first, ask questions when you are ready, and find ways to give back to the community with your effort or knowledge. It won't all make sense at first. That's okay. This is one of the only authentic communities on the internet. It will take time to fully understand it. We're not sure we figured it out. What we do know is that this is one of the most inspiring and compelling conversations online. If you are interested in stepping up your event or media game, you've come to the right place. Heading level 4 escape.
There is Ken.
I actually understood all of that.
I have never
listening to it. It's like
I have it slowed way down. I purposely slowed it down.
Okay, I was like, I felt very impressed with
Now
myself.
I have
Now,
to hear
how do you,
what's full speed sound like?
Yeah, you got to play it back to us full speed. No, yeah.
Office.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
A
Play it
global
back full speed.
conversation we're not about.
Okay, hang on.
80%, 82, 80, 84, 86%, 87, 80, 90%, 91%.
Let's make sure I'm in the right spot here.
A global conversation where no one's left out. Navigation region visited. Heading level 1. Link graphic. Office Hours Global logo. Office Hours Global main navigation. Navigation region. List of free items. Visited link schedule. Visited link about. Visited link join us. List end. Office Hours Global main navigation. Navigation region end. Visited link. Office Hours Global. Rightward 0. Visited link join us. Rightward 0 about navigation region end. Article heading level 1 about Office Hours panelist from first row. Left to right colon Brian Maddox, Aaron Graham, Daria Musk, Jonas Stoddle, Alex Lindsay. Second row. Left to right colon Charles Klein Graphic Jr., Liberty White, Jason Seep, Emily Russo, Leo Laporte. Third row. Left to right colon John Middleton, Tony Mobley, Jim Hankins, Stuart Fairweather. Fourth graphic row. Left to right colon Chad Lafarge, John Hewitt, Doug Ferguson, J. McKenna, George E. Kennedy Jr., Plalock Lopez Waterman. Last row. Left to right colon graphic John Pretty, Chris Fenwick, Bill Davis, Mickey McAcher, Az McAchar, Guy Cochran. Graphic and March of Escape.
That's about full speed.
Wow.
Maybe a little bit slow if I'm really busy, but that's about full speed.
Wow. And what did you have to? And then Ken, you put those names are in the.
Yes, Ken can speak to how he did that.
Because for those listening, those names aren't there. Those names aren't there.
Are not
those are
there.
There's just images on the screen, and so Ken has added in our website. By the way, well done. All the names so that can be listened to. So that making it accessible. Go ahead, Ken.
Yes. A few days ago, Laura messaged me to say that we're going to be using the website for the accessibility, and she heard me say, because I'm really proud of that about picture. And she heard me say, and I did have it alt tagged, but it was Office Hour Panelist. And she was saying, that obviously it's not a full description of who's there. And for me, actually, it was by going through and doing that process. If I did it right at the beginning, it would have taken, it only took me 10 minutes, but it would have taken me 2 minutes to do if I did it when I was making that picture. But it's now added for me, because Laura and I went through this and did the speed reading, and and it was a normal thing. She turned it down for me initially, but not very long, she turned it up, and I, just like many of you here, kind of could fully comprehend it. But anyway, back to the picture. Sorry, I'm really very excited about what Laura and I are working, about the whole accessibility thing. But anyway, back to the picture. Because I'm really proud of the picture now adding.
Yeah, my experience was that although I do have some sight, I said to Ken, if I close my eyes, I don't get the experience of the work you put in without the more full description. And it was like, there's something missing. Yeah, it tells me there's a graphic there. It tells me that it's not relevant to navigation, but there's an experience missing for me who has sat on this panel and sat with these people and been blessed by their presence.
Right. Yeah, so me putting that just bit of extra time, putting all those names in, actually makes the picture now even better, and even better for me, because of how I know that people with visual issues can experience as much of the joy I have of making that picture, they can get a
Right.
lot more from it. So being more descriptive in your thumbnails, in your pictures, adds, especially if I take time to choose what thumbnail I'm going to use. So adding a more descriptive part of it, I now know I'm now reaching more with that, making that choice.
And if you have more questions, go ahead and ask them on Mukana. We'll jump to John and then Jason real quick, and then we'll go to the questions here pretty quick.
Ken, real quick, can you change my name from John Pretty to John Pretto?
And then
I've got to say, so I've done a fair bit of ADA assessment for companies. Well done. That was very well done. And he's conforming, for those who have never heard Jaws before, he's conforming to a lot of like things that are, kind of unspoken. And that was really good.
And Laura, how is the website doing? How are we doing on the website?
Website is amazing. Ken, what were we at 99% last time we ran the accessibility checker on it?
Yeah, depending the most hardcore accessibility checker, the one that IBM have made, their website is 95%. Our website is 97%. So yeah.
And to be clear, like when we make design decisions, my commitment is that we stay at 95% or above. So if we decide to put things into the website, it has to have that level, or we're not going to put it in. Like, like it's not, like it's gotta live at that level. We can be as creative as we want, but it has to live inside of that level of accessibility. So let's jump to some of the questions.
Fair enough. The first one comes from Frank Henry in Ottawa, Canada. And Frank says, how do you present ASL interpreters with other content on screen? Are there any best practices?
For starters, you want to make sure that like we do with the panel, well lit, back, but you want them to be able to be seen, but you don't want them to take away from the overall experience. It has to be additive, not an afterthought.
What do you think of, so Apple in their keynotes has a separate URL where, so there's the full frame, and then it's not even a separate URL. If you're at the Apple page, you can hit accessibility and you get one, basically the ASL interpreter is much larger and the screen they're able to see it. So it's a very clear vision of it. So they have one that is just the show, and one where you can just click on the site. You don't have to go anywhere else. You just click it on the site and it'll show you a different view. Is that something that you suggest, Laura?
I kind of like that as an option. I had not actually seen that on the Apple Keynote website. It's been a while since I've gone to an Apple Keynote, but I think it's a great option because you're giving people the choice and you're putting it right out there.
Yeah.
Where I have a problem with things like that is when they have to be requested. You have it, but you don't make it publicly available. If you need something, let us know is not universal.
Right. Yeah. And I know that we spent a lot of time doing ASL, and for us, we're trying to find, we get our folks to get the gray screen like I use gray screen. And then, good webcams and really clean look, is something we really work on to make sure that the ASL looks as good as possible. Next question.
Frank Henry is back is back from Ottawa with, how do you approach multilingual closed captions for post-event video? Who are the best companies that provide this service?
I actually don't have a good answer for this one. I don't know if anybody else on the panel might. I've not done a whole lot of post-production. That's really not where I live.
If you ping me, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can find it from our producer. We definitely have captions made and translations made. The main thing that you have to be careful of with multi-language captions, if they're technical, we do a lot of technical conferences, is that you have to have your own people in your own company who specialize in that to watch the video and give you corrections. So what you want to do is you want to burn the captions in, so there's no question about what it is for each one. So you burn Chinese, Japanese, Mandarin, or like whatever it is, Spanish. Burn those in. Send a video to them. We send it to them in Frame.io, and which is now part of Adobe. And we send it to them there. Give us every word that doesn't make sense, because you cannot expect your translators to know what every little thing about a Mac or everything about a PC or everything about some technical area. The reason you use people that are internal into your company is because they will A, know it better than anyone else, and B, they will not be the ones complaining about it. Like, like they won't go there, because the people that you do it, and if someone complains about it, then they get to do it the next time. Like you just rope them into, well, you look at it. And oftentimes someone in a company will take more effort than anybody outside the company, because they don't want to be the one that let it through, and so they'll take more time to really pick at it. And then you get great translations. If you don't do that, if you just depend on the translation companies, you will not get great translations. And then the other thing we work with people is to understand that, especially when it's live captioning, that's just not going to be perfect. But it's still better than nothing, right? I mean, Laura, would you agree that it's better than not putting them up?
Yes, it's better than not putting them up. But I will say that if you have the choice between something like Otter AI versus a human captioning inside of Zoom, I would always go with your human captioner.
Right. Yeah. And as an inside thing for Zoom also is that Zoom has a way to do a plugin that wraps through an external service and back into Zoom with a captioner, or a captioner can go attach directly into Zoom. The direct connection is significantly better. Finding the captioners to do that is harder, but the quality of the captions is much higher. Next question
comes to us from Chirig Chahida in the process. He asks, what changes for video production, if any, are in the WCAG 2.1 guidelines?
I would have to go look to be very specific about video production. I know that when you're talking about WCAG,
can you explain what WCAG is?
That's a Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. There is the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, puts out a set of guidelines, and there are different levels. There's AA and AAA. AAA is more stringent than AA. I call that bookshelf knowledge. I know how to use them. I know how to look them up, but like sitting here trying to think through the entirety of those right now, it's kind of difficult for me to say. I know the one thing that I am very, very picky about anymore with it is flicker and flash rate. Zoom virtual backgrounds, get my heckles up.
What's wrong with them?
If it's not done correctly, the aliasing around can cause a strobe effect, and that you're talking anybody that has any type of photosensitivity, be it light sensitivity with a visual impairment, specifically epileptic, some versions of epilepsy, you can trigger off a seizure if they go off at the wrong frequency and timing.
I'm always looking for every excuse that I can have to tell people not to use. So this is a better excuse than all the other ones we've had so far. Is that you could trigger, that. I think that's a great one. Next question.
Next question comes to us again from Chirig Chita, and Chirig says, what virtual event platforms are the most accessible or striving towards following the guidelines?
I think Zoom's got it. Pretty much locked down.
And why is Zoom better?
Zoom is number one. It's becoming very much the standard. That they're going to set the standard for the world, and they've just come out very hard and did that. I was actually at the Zoom Education, the Zoom Academy, and I popped a question into Zoom Academy about the webinar, because you can change the font size in the chat, but you can't do that in the Q&A for the webinar. And I was like, hey, how do I do this? And I had somebody from Zoom private message me back going, we are putting the feature request in immediately. Watch for it coming. So when you get to them and you get their support can be a little wonky if you can't get to somebody going just through the website to put something in. But when you get to somebody at Zoom, they can be very quick and they seem to be very responsive.
Yeah, very good.
I'm not going to comment on some of the other platforms I've used, but and embedding Zoom inside of something else is usually not the greatest idea in the world either. I found that to be less than amazing.
Next question.
And Cherry Cheetah is back again, and this time he asked, what is some low-hanging fruit that people can quickly help to improve accessibility of productions?
Alt tags, alt tag everything. Have somebody run it through, NVDA is a free screen reader. Get somebody that can run your stuff through NVDA. And when you're talking to talent, there are some really simple things that you can do. And remember, if you're working with talent that have disabilities, they know you're the expert in the video production and the event side of it. But when it comes to something that they're struggling with, have that conversation because they know what's comfortable for them, what's possible for them. So you just need to open the conversation. Communicate, communicate, communicate.
Next question.
Comes from Scott Ryder in Perth, Australia. And Scott asks, thinking about a time before frameworks when pages were lighter, would it be accurate to say that most modern JavaScript frameworks, for example, React.js or Node.js, do not make accessibility compliance easier? What is an effective way to get a site to improve?
I'm going to ask Ken to weigh in on this one because this is kind of his area.
Go ahead, Ken.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand in the back end, Alex. That's the access part of it.
Absolutely.
We'll sort that out later. I'm afraid it's not getting better. It should be. There is no reason why it shouldn't. And actually, a lot of those that you can bypass those because most of this is really done in your HTML or CSS. So you don't the libraries which are adding extra whiz bang features to a website. They're not going to. You can handle those parts yourself in the HTML of your or the CSS of your website. So you can bypass a lot of those plugins to do that. But no, that it isn't a first priority for some of those. Then it's more about making it look pretty and using colors which don't work in terms of if 10% of males are colorblind, red green colorblind and various things in between. A lot of those libraries seem to ignore that fact. So it's that's why I don't use them and write my own.
Next question.
Leo Mendel, who was just speaking a little bit ago here in the panel from Pinner UK, says the WordPress community have a dedicated accessibility team. Do other platforms have the equivalent, for example, Zoom, Teams, and so forth?
Microsoft does have a dedicated accessibility group. I find them to be less than easy to work with sometimes, depending upon what you're talking about, what you're talking to them about. I had a less than stellar communication with them here not too long ago, but everything purports to have an accessibility, and you just got to get in, work with it, and bang on it and see what is. Zoom seems to do a very good job at it and be very responsive once you can get to somebody that you can say, look, this is an accessibility issue.
Right.
So it's
and oftentimes it's a person in the company that is gluing everything together. What we have found for the most part is there's one or two people it's their only accountability, and then really the question is how much support do they get from the very top of the company? Yes. What I've heard externally is that, like, for instance, there's one or two people that work on it at Apple, and they have absolute support from the very, very top. so that it's a huge priority. And so I think that the backing of that, and then a person, then they can talk to the teams, that it's just a matter of technically putting it together at that point. But it's someone who's kind of the flag bearer of that process. Go ahead, Laura.
And there are also situations where when you're talking about things like and there's basic accessibility things you can learn. PDFs Adobe's got issues. But things of that nature, that there's things you can learn to do to make them more accessible as well. Google, making a Word document accessible for my educators, making a Word document accessible, making a PDF accessible, and making a PowerPoint accessible. And the other thing I recommend is always having your materials in more than one format. Be able to get them to more than one.
So what, like for instance, the website plays all that text. Would it be yet a step above to have somebody read all that text instead of it being a auto, or do you prefer the machine to do it?
The problem with that comes down to, now every time you make a change, you got to have somebody go back and re-record that. And I mean, Ken updates the main page, the schedule page, once a week, and then links everything in every day. So it's almost better to make it so that it's accessible, by the screen reader.
But I think the question is would it be better, or would it not be? Because would it be harder to actually listen to it 3x?
It would be harder to listen to it, because I don't know if it showed on your screen, but it was actually tracking with a little red box, word by word.
Right.
And you wouldn't get that. Now there are some news sites now that are actually putting audios in of people reading the news story. Those are nice. They're almost like a podcast type thing, for static content.
I've been amazed at how much Apple's putting into their news. The Apple News is they just keep on adding them, and they're incredibly well produced. I would say that when it comes to like audio production of periodicals, Apple is at the top. I'd say Foreign Affairs is probably second, and then Economist is third, and then after that it just kind of falls off.
Yeah.
So periodicals.
And for periodicals, it's not bad, but there are other things that it's not amazing for.
Yeah. Next question.
Aaron Husledge says, is JAWS the only screen reader you use?
No. I am, depending upon where I'm at, what I'm doing, and what the content calls for, I will go, my preferred hierarchy is JAWS first, NVDA second, and Windows. I am strictly Windows user anymore. So Windows Narrator, if I am in a position where I can't get anything else to work. And I do definitely prefer, for PDFs, JAWS over Adobe Read Out Loud and some of that stuff. There are other, the one that I really, really love for PDFs just went out of business. It was called Premier Literacy PDF Equalizer. They've had some issues, and I don't believe they're still available, but that was the one that was really like the gold standard for a while. And now Read and Write Gold has taken over for some of that stuff, but I'm still very much on the JAWS bandwagon. Yes.
Next question.
Aaron is back with, can you talk about mobile accessibility?
Mobile accessibility, Apple's got it in the bag.
What makes it, why does Apple have it in the bag?
Because Apple, number one, has been doing it longer, and they have that eye to it. But you have to still, it's something that nobody's going to be able to turn on the Apple screen reader and just go for it. One thing you have to remember on mobile is it's very, very different, because all your gestures change with a screen reader on an iPhone or an iPad. And that there is a learning curve there, but it's much less than the learning curve you would have on Android. And I just don't even want to talk about the Kindle accessibility.
All right. Next question.
Aaron Husledge is right back again with, how important is video description in live events?
It's rare in live events, but it would be very helpful. There are some descriptive video. I've posted different times in Discord examples of descriptive videos that are done very well. It's hard to get a lot of times with live the description you need.
Is it something that would help?
It would absolutely be helpful. It's just something that there's not enough people out there screaming that they want it, and that again, it comes down to that what's put in for the few helps everybody.
Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
I was just going to ask Laura if you can explain the difference between closed captioning and video description.
Video description is where you'll have somebody it explains what is going on around. It's an audio that explains what's going on in the video. So it's basically the audio. It gives you the context of what's going on so that the dialogue makes more sense.
And it'll literally be like a whisper of, we see it. I've worked on a lot of projects with it, and you'll have like Tim Cook enters the stage, like whatever those, and it's kind of someone whispering to you to kind of tell you. If you couldn't see it, it's like, what would you say? It's flying away from Earth, and now it's going to now returning to Earth to a watch. And so it's really hard. Like, it's someone who can be very concise, like someone who does this. What's amazing is they'll describe to you what's happening, and it's not just describing it. They have to be super concise because they have to keep up, and they have to stay out of the way of the person talking. So you're kind of like whispering to that, but you're not doing it over top of the person talking.
Yes, and it's much more commonly found in post-production than it is in live.
Yeah. Go ahead, Aaron.
I mean, you said you don't get what you need. Wait, can you explain that a little bit, like for live stuff?
It's number one, it's got to be really rehearsed. So there's times in live where somebody trying to do that is almost at a disadvantage because they don't know what's coming next. And it's just something that's not really available. I mean,
and one of the things that on large projects that I've worked on, those both the captioners and the video description and the interpreters often get to watch a lot of rehearsals. So especially when it's a tightly wound event, they'll sit there and they get to watch this over and over and over again and they practice doing it over and over and over again. And it massively improves the accuracy of the video description, the interpretation, closed captioning. Everything gets better if you let them. Now, for security reasons, people oftentimes don't let them do that. But it is a huge bonus.
Yeah. And my question is really if they're if they're going to be in that at that point anyway, why can't we clear them security wise and let them?
And there's ways to do it. There's like literally we've worked on it where there's no notes. We tape off all of the USB jacks. they're so they're doing their captions and they're typing, but they have to leave the computer there. Everything's taped down. They can't they can't walk away with anything. And at that point, they are no more of a security issue than the camera operators or anybody else in the room. There's no way to take text or information out of the building. And that usually alleviates some of that. I know one of my pet peeves is the interpreters don't use very good. The interpreters don't use very good mics. We always have little bad headset mics, and I'm always like, just give them good mics. It would sound a lot better. All right, next question.
Absolutely.
Next question happens to be mine. And I was wondering, because I run into this a lot, we get a lot of video produced that requires closed captioning. And I was just wondering if there's any standard as to where I should put the little CC symbol so I can trigger people that there is closed captioning in this video. I know a lot of times people don't put anything on there, and it's just up to whether it's turned on or not on the part of the viewer. So is there a standard for triggering that?
I have not seen one. That's a good question.
A lot of players will show it, and people who know what they're looking for know to look for the closed caption, the CC symbol, like at YouTube. Like if YouTube's getting a closed caption, it will tell you it's getting one. Yeah. Like there's a little button that will
But I've never actually had anything where I've had the option as to where to put it or how to trigger it. So
it's actually one of the reasons that you see sometimes at the beginning of a show, closed captioning brought to you by blah, 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 blah. That's actually a call to action that there is closed captioning. And you can do that at the beginning of a show. Sometimes
it's not a standard for just put 2 seconds of the little CC symbol in the lower right-hand corner. And then as you're scanning through YouTube things, you would know, oh, that one's captioned. Cool.
Oh, I know. I understand now. You're not talking about actually where to put the button to trigger the closed caption. You're talking about where to put the
like, to know that it's there.
In the signal to the viewer that this content is captioned. Right. And should you invoke that?
Yes. I think, right at the beginning, couple seconds, even across the middle of the bottom of the middle of the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Next question.
Leo Mendel's up next from Pinner in the UK. And here on the panel, is closed caption turned on for attendees in office hours? I can't see it from here. Are there any reasons for the current setup?
Yeah, so the reason we don't turn it on is because it burns it into the YouTube stream. So when we, this is one place the Zoom hasn't knocked it out of the park. So it's a really ugly burn-in that goes into the YouTube stream that is really problematic. So we're working on a solution to solve that problem, but we need Zoom to fix it, which is that it has to. So what Zoom should be doing is sending an HTTP stream from the event, grabbing the link from that via the API and pushing it in so that it shows up as text and saved as an SRT. And that's not what they're doing. They're just burning it into the video. So when they fix that, we will absolutely use it every show. So that's why we used it one show, and it just looks so bad that it's just so poorly implemented that I don't even think it does anybody a favor, because it's just an embarrassment about how bad it is. So hopefully they'll fix that. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron, real quick.
Could you turn on live YouTube auto captions at least in the interim?
I not really, because I don't have the way that Zoom does this through the API. It's just passing it. Like we don't.
Oh, but the generated ones.
When we do it, when we go into Office Hours 2.0, we're going straight into YouTube. We have total control. I'm actually trying to get a captioning company to take captioning students. Like I'm trying to find someone that are willing to, who want to just have lots of things to caption, and working with us for Office Hours where everything's captioned live, truly captioned live, so that into YouTube. So that's my goal for Office Hours, is to have it actually live captioned into the system. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, has there been any thought to accessibility by production hardware and software vendors? I know that Yamaha, he notes, or at least so he's heard, worked with Stevie Wonder on the design of the Motif and Montage keyboard so they could be used by blind musicians.
Go ahead, Laura.
I don't have a ton of experience with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, production is not my main background. So I'd be interested to hear what anybody else knows.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as the actual production, I don't know of very many things that are made easier that way. Next question.
John Idelson, our friend from Monterey, California, says, what would you like to see the higher ed and K-12 communities do to get the word out about accessibility, both requirements and opportunities?
I think one of the first things they need to do is they need to drop the stigmatization of it and really come to a spot where it's universal design, because it's not right now. It's kind of segmented, and you have to go through this process where you have to go to this office and request, and they have to verify that the disability is legitimate. And then that's got to circle back to the professors. Really, and also get the accessibility on par, because there is a huge step between K through 12 and higher ed. We need to close that gap somehow, because you go from what they call the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is much more about those students succeeding in a K through 12 environment, to falling under the ADA, which is more about access to the content without. So you've got K through 12 who's altering the content for the ability of the student. Then you've got higher ed who's saying, we'll make the content accessible, but we're not going to alter it in any way, shape, or form. And there's got to be a middle ground there somewhere.
Next question.
JJ McKenna is in this time from San Rafael, California, and says, are there ways to get access to the online services like Bookshare for long-term use when accessibility is isolated to, quote, learning disability?
I don't know what Bookshare's current is. I know there was a paid tier, and you could email them, and they would work with you on if it was a non-education setting, but you had situations where it wasn't feasible to pay for the service either. So they are very Bookshare, and I forget what they go by now. Bookshare is the older term for it, but they are very much a, we will work with you type company.
Next question.
Ken Jordan here in the panel from Surrey in the UK. Is it preferable for online documents to be formatted in HTML text or as a PDF document?
I say give the option because everybody's a little bit different. You know, if you can, you know, HTML with the possibility of a PDF. I used to say PDFs were the most accessible things in the world, but then when I discovered that the product I was using wasn't widely used and that it was the only thing, it was the only one that really did it well, I've gotten away from PDF for accessibility. Word documents. I'll take a Word doc over a PDF any day anymore.
Yeah. I know one thing that is a big complaint for me when I'm listening to, I have it's called Dream, I think it's DreamShare or whatever, that I listen to books. I listen to PDFs. And my biggest thing is I realize people don't format them that way anymore. So when I build things, I build them without any inserts, you know, nothing, you know, I got to figure out a way to, you know, I'm trying to have a version of it that you can listen to. I listened to 192 pages one time of NASA thing on, and there was all this bibliography that just drove me crazy because it would be like every 4 pages, there was like 90 seconds of bibliography. And then it would go back into the next thing. And I was like, okay, people have to rethink the way that they build their documents.
They reflow documents. Yeah.
And you can listen to them. And
there's some code now that will actually reflow the document so that so that it does, you know,
get rid of all that.
Yeah, it gets rid of all that and it infers the infer the reading order from document or read as displayed are the two options normally. So
that's interesting. That's great.
Yeah. It's getting better, but we have a long way to go. And the other thing I do want to say is the Library of Congress has a talking book library that you can do. They have a lot of them, and that's free. The Library Service for the Blind is free to anybody who has print, what they call, they're now calling them print disabilities. So blind, dyslexia, dysgraphia, some of that stuff all qualify.
Right. Go ahead, Aaron, real quick.
Yeah, I've used NLS for myself and my son, and I put a link to it in the Mukana.
That's great. Next question.
JJ McKenna, San Rafael, here in the panel often says, is a human voice reading easier to listen to than a computer voice reading?
Yes, it can be. I am, and I will tell you, JAWS has many more. I'm on my work machine at the moment, so I don't have all the voices for JAWS installed. There are some much more human sounding voices than the one I'm currently using because it's utility, not pleasure with what I'm doing with this. But yeah, there are some much more human sounding voices. And the National Library uses all human readers. So
I know that when you listen at speed, you get really sensitive to things. Like people who have bad diction are really hard to listen to, and people who English is a second language is really difficult, you know, and or any language. I always feel like people should just speak in their first language or find someone who can, you know, like it's, you know, because it's just really from an accessibility. I don't know, Laura, is that because it seems like from an accessibility perspective, you want everyone speaking in their first language.
Yes, you do, because translation's hard. I mean, because they're trying to do it in their head. And then because when you're having a conversation with somebody in the United States, you're talking English. Yes, they know English, but their original language was, say, Mandarin or Chinese or even Spanish. They're having that conversation in their head in Spanish, Mandarin, or Chinese and translating it and spitting it out.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Next one comes to us from James Babbitt in San Diego. He says, we're mostly using PCs. How does accessibility differ on Mac versus PC?
It's very different. I've not used a Mac in a long time. I do know that when I was on Mac back in the OS 8 days, it was clunky, and I know it's gotten much, much better with their built-in. And I will say this about built-in. With the accessibility built in, it's always in forefront in Apple's mind. And if I didn't have to use PC for work, I would probably go all Mac, but I'm just not willing to do two platforms.
Next question.
Next question comes from Ashadev, and he says, should we be thinking about inclusive design rather than accessibility design to get a broader reach?
Yes, I prefer the term universal design. There's actually something called Universal Design for Learning. It goes by UDL. And I don't think there's enough talked about UDL in the education and other settings. And COVID kind of changed that for a lot of people.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tony Mobley in Georgia, and Tony is interested, and it says, it seems to me that in the past, the iPad is head and shoulders above other mobile devices. Do you think they are catching up? The other ones, I guess.
To some degree not. It depends on what you're trying to do, what you're doing it for, and it depends. The iPad will always be the gold standard for certain things, but there are other things that are done better in other ways.
Next question.
Next question comes from Chris Marshall in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. And Chris says, as an SEO professional, I know that, that's hard to read there. I know that implementing accessibility forces developers to form a reliable hierarchy that is both a readable hierarchy that is both understandable by search engines and users. Has Laura found that accessibility plays a role in search engine ranking?
I've heard both sides of this. Some people will say that yes, once they formatted their search engine in a much more hierarchical way, it surfaced much faster. And I've heard people say that it didn't. So I have not personally actually A/B tested this myself.
Ken, do you have any notes on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. The site structure that I use is by the implementation, and now with Laura's help, even better implementation of alt tags. The ranking is higher by a long way.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's a lot higher with what I'm doing now.
Next question.
Matt Parker in Sarasota, Florida asks, what are good references for best practices in accessibility? Would the ADA gov and so forth be good sources?
The three I like are the W3C, which is your World Wide Web Consortium. And they're the ones that post the WCAG 2.1 standards, and also Ally. It's A11Y. Their stuff is very, very, and they actually have an entire Slack group that you can go on and ask questions. And I'm in there quite often. It's coders asking questions all day, every day. And do you find any others, Ken?
The IBM accessibility one, because it was the hardest, I was looking for the thing that would push the site to the limit, and that was the hardest one to. That's the most. It
checks the most stuff.
It scans, yes, it checks for the most stuff. Yeah.
I do find that 3Play Media does a pretty good job. They actually provide captioning as a service, but they've got a lot of good guides on their website that I often refer back to just because they just put it all in one place, So and it's great marketing. They are a perfect example of how to market yourself by just producing great content about things that people need. So I use them as a reference, but I know that they're a service. I happen to have other services that I use, but I still use them. So, and I know that they're there. Next question.
Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area. What are the current most accurate ASR platforms that can be used for generating captions within Zoom?
I'm always going to go back to you want a live captioner directly into Zoom. Other than that, because I will tell you, I made the comment one time on a thread about Otter AI, and I got by the community. They were ready to hang me up by my toes.
The thing that AI is capable of is just saying horrible things, like just not just inaccurate, but horrible things like that it thinks that you just said. And we've watched it piece together some stuff that was truly embarrassing. So that's the real risk with AI captioning. Next question.
Jim Schrader in Minnesota in the USA says closed captioning is now a setting in Android 12 beta that can display anything the phone hears or audio from the phone. It now uses an AI-based system to figure out what's being said. You can also use an AI voice and have settings to adjust speeds now and tones. So an information post, really.
Yeah, it's great.
I will tell you that Google still has some issues. I love the Google Assistant, but even that can't get everything right. I don't know how many times it's called the wrong person for me.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Next question. My current problem right now is Apple, by the way, was when you tell it, it says call at the beginning of everything that I'm voice texting. For some reason, it just keeps on throwing call as the first word. And I'm like, I didn't say that at all. Like, I don't even understand how we got this going. All right, next question.
It's reading some tag. So this one's from me again. And I was just curious. I was wondering if services like Audible, where content is performed by professionals, cause people who listen primarily as their information input, change the speed at which you prefer to consume things. I notice when I'm reading, if I'm suddenly reading poetry, I slow way down because I just want to enjoy the language. Is there an equivalent in your practice when you're constantly getting this information and constantly doing it fast?
If I have a difference between if I'm doing technical stuff or if I'm doing something for enjoyment. If I'm doing technical and it's something that I'm looking for something very specific, I will run through a huge block of text till I get to what I want, and I will slow down and read that particular piece that I want. If I'm doing something for enjoyment, depending on poetry, yeah, I prefer it a little bit closer to normal speaking speed, but it really depends on what you're listening to too.
I know that I've become very sensitive to it where I want to listen to a preview at speed because I don't listen to poetry. I listen to non-fictional books. And if the reader slows me down in the reading of it, I won't buy the book. I want to listen at 1.75 to 2. And if I can't get to that speed and I can't understand what that person's saying because of their accent or because of their structure or whatever, I just don't buy the book because I'm like, I don't want to listen to it at 1.5 or 1.25. It's too slow.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Yeah,
and I'm so used to working with JAWS that's like I don't know that the human bothers me as much, but it's
Right.
like because I get to that point where it's like I'm moving through stuff with JAWS, sometimes multiple pages in 10 minutes, multiple pages.
Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newman, Georgia is up next. I have a special needs relative who's having a hard time passing the GED exams. Any suggestions for tools, maybe?
Well, can you repeat that question? I missed something there for a
Sure.
second.
I have a special needs relative who is having a hard time passing the GED exams. Are there any suggestions for that circumstance?
Depending upon the needs, ask for the accommodations necessary. The GED, even though it's a standardized exam, has to provide general accommodations. Beyond that, I have not worked with anybody on GED in a long time. And I don't know, that should fall under the free and appropriate free and appropriate public education at the K through 12 level. So you may want to ask some questions of the GED people about that.
Next question.
Scott Ryder in Perth, Australia is in what I find many examples on Android TV and Fire Stick Streamer where it's hard to read. For example, font is too small, lacks contrast. The highlighted button does not stand out, so you can see this in Mukana. Is this device specific? Anyone older annoyed by this?
Yeah, it can be device specific. Mukana is probably and it probably also screen size specific. I know that I'm running on like a 24-inch monitor and I like the Mukana mobile myself. I am very much more on the mobile side of Mukana, even if I'm running it on a large screen. Good, whether I'm on what device I'm on, I run the mobile site.
And we do have in the profile for Mukana the ability to adjust text size.
Yes, you do, and I do. I run it at the highest, and there's also some like color choices that you can make in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, I've noticed that a lot of U.S. government public service announcements or documents are in Korean and Mandarin along with French, not just Spanish. Why would that be?
My best guess would be because there's a demand. Our government does nothing until there's a demand for it. And since they have to be with the laws, there's obviously a use for it. They wouldn't do it if they wouldn't take the time to produce it if there wasn't a use for it.
Yeah, a lot of times they have the data of how many people are requesting it from a specific background, and they just follow the largest ones. They say, well, we can only pick this many. Like for us, a lot of times with like captions, we recommend there are basically lines that we draw for our clients that we say there's the English and Spanish, like that's one line you can draw. As soon as you go to 3, you really have to do the UN6. Like it's like, because then someone's going to say, why am I left out? So then there's the UN6, and that's the next line to draw. Then after that, it's a wild, wild west. Like if you decide to go over 6, you really have to look at your market and see where it is. I think that the most I've seen somebody do is 18 languages. And so that's a whole another game to do there. But once you open it up, you really have to look at that pretty critically. Laura, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Oh, we have one more sliding in at the last minute. I thought we were done there. Go ahead.
In Minnesota got in at the last second. Oh, another one just popped up.
No, we're gonna. This is it.
Okay, how do we cover a wide range of accessibility when each language has slang or accents for the same language? Do accents get lost over time and become a new standard we create now that we're using computers?
Oh, good question. I think it depends, and I try when I tell anybody, I always tell them, talk to the general audience, not to the slang or the industry specifics. Or if you're gonna use it, the first time it's just like writing. The first time you use it, you have to explain it.
I know on our end, we try to, especially if we're doing multi-language or we really try to get rid of most of the idioms, slang, those types of things, and talk in very clear, concrete terms, just to make sure that that people can understand what's going on there. Anyway, Laura, thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot.
Thank you. Yes, and there is a Ken's going to put my resource list on your website.
Great.
At the top of that, there is an email address. I encourage anybody, reach out to me. I'm in and out of after hours, depending upon my schedule. Ping me on Discord. We can jump into after hours. I'm normally around on Saturdays. Ask. Here's my 2 final parting thoughts. If a child cannot learn the way that we teach them, then maybe we should teach them the way that they can learn. And information is power.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken?
Yeah, I just said I'll chat with Laura not to put, we'll do a redirect for your email address. So if you remove that email address, just so you don't have to worry with spam or anything like that.
Okay.
I'll set up a redirect of that email that will get to you, that will filter out any rubbish that will come. So if you remove that from your resources document,
I will do that. Thank you.
Out. Okay.
Great. All right. Great second hour. Thank you so much. That was amazing. That was amazing, Laura.
Thank you.
I think it's a really important issue, and I think that the more we learn about it, to your point, the less ominous it is, and the more we can make it work. So thank you so much to the producers for all the great questions and guiding this conversation, both first hour and second hour. And thanks to our panelists for having a great set of answers and keeping it moving. And again, thanks to Laura for coming on and sharing so much about accessibility. Remember, tomorrow is the long day. Start at 5 a.m. Well, we don't really start. There's just we shift gears at 7, and then we'll go until about 2. So anyway, we'll see you then, or we'll see you in a couple minutes in the after hours. Bye-bye.